Mind your step, moving through here.
We'll take 2 of those barrels if you help load them.
Sierra learned early where to stand. Not in doorways, not in the middle of roads, not where conversations gathered or laughter rose too loud. She stood at edges, of fields, of rooms, of the village square, always close enough to help, never close enough to belong. The humans of Briar Hollow had not chased her away when she first arrived 3 winters ago. That, she understood, was mercy. The war had already carved deep scars into both sides of the valley. An orphaned orc child appearing on their southern road could have been met with stones. Instead, it had been met with silence. Silence was harder. Now 12 years old, Sierra moved through the village with careful precision. Her green skin no longer looked as bright as it once had. Months under human sun and wind had dulled it to a softer shade. Her tusks were small and barely curved, more a reminder of what she was than a threat. Still, when she passed, conversations thinned. That morning, she carried 2 buckets of water from the well to the baker's shop. The wood handles dug into her palms, but she did not shift her grip. She preferred the ache of labor to the ache of being watched. "Set them by the back," Mrs. Halden said without looking directly at her. "Yes, ma'am," Sierra replied softly. Her human speech had improved over the years. The harsh edges of her clan's language had smoothed into careful consonants and shorter words. She spoke quietly, so no one would mistake tone for aggression. As she stepped back into the street, 2 boys about her age stopped their game of tossing pebbles. They stared, not cruelly, just curiously. One of them raised a hand in a hesitant half-wave. Sierra paused, unsure. Then she gave the smallest nod. The boys resumed their game. That was progress. At the far end of the square, carpenters were raising the wooden frame that would hold lanterns for the harvest festival. Briar Hollow always celebrated the end of reaping with music and dance. Even after the war, they had kept that tradition. Especially after the war. Sierra slowed as she passed the half-built archway. Bright cloth banners lay folded nearby. The scent of fresh-cut timber mixed with the dry sweetness of hay. She liked watching the preparations. She did not join them. 2 young women practiced steps near the well, skirts swaying in coordinated turns. Their laughter rang freely, unburdened. Sierra felt her feet move slightly in unconscious response. A shift of weight, a subtle pivot. She stopped immediately. An older man repairing a fence glanced her way. Not unkindly, but not invitingly either. She stepped back to the shadow of the grain store. That was where she belonged. At the edge. It had not always been like this. In her clan, before fire and steel and shouting tore it apart, dance had not belonged to festivals alone. It had belonged to memory, to grief, to celebration. Movements passed from mother to daughter, from elder to child. Feet striking earth in rhythm were not for performance. They were for telling stories. Sometimes, at night, alone in the small shed behind the Cooper's house where she slept, she practiced them. Quietly, barefoot against packed dirt. The turns were slower now, less fierce. She had softened them without meaning to. Human villages did not understand war dances. Orc dances were too sharp, too strong, too honest. A cartwheel cracked loudly near the square, startling her from her thoughts. The carpenter cursed under his breath. Without thinking, Sierra stepped forward and lifted the fallen beam easily, holding it steady while he reset the wheel. The carpenter blinked at her. "Thank you," he muttered. She nodded and stepped back before he could say more. Strength was acceptable. Presence was complicated. As the sun climbed higher, villagers moved through the square in busy patterns, weaving baskets, hanging garlands, tasting early casks of cider. Music drifted faintly from the old fiddler house near the western fence line. He practiced every afternoon before the festival. Sierra paused to listen. The notes were uneven but warm. Her fingers twitched slightly in rhythm. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to imagine stepping into the center of the square, just once, without the weight of eyes measuring her difference. The image dissolved quickly. Belonging was not given loudly here. It was earned slowly, and she had learned to be patient. A gust of wind lifted dust along the road. Lantern cloth fluttered against wooden beams. The square buzzed with preparation. And as laughter rose again from the dancers near the well, Syrah remained where she always stood, at the edge, watching, waiting, not yet knowing that before the festival ended, she would no longer be standing there at all. The harvest festival came with color. By late afternoon, Briar Hollow had transformed. Lanterns hung in curved lines across the square, their glass painted in warm shades of amber and crimson. Tables lined the edges of the road, piled with fresh bread, roasted squash, honey cakes, and steaming kettles of cider. The scent of spice and wood smoke filled the air. Syrah helped string the final lanterns. She climbed easily where others needed ladders, tying knots carefully so the ropes would not slip when night winds came. No one objected to her help. No one invited her to stay once the work was done either. "Careful with that beam," Tomas called as she descended from the archway. "I have it," she replied. He nodded, satisfied. Work was safe. Work had rules. Celebration did not. As dusk approached, villagers began changing into festival clothes: bright skirts, embroidered vests, polished boots. Syrah retreated behind the coopers, shed to wash dust from her hands and face. She owned only 2 dresses, both plain and mended more than once. She chose the less worn one, a soft brown cloth that blended easily with shadow. When she stepped back into the square, the music had begun. Old Master Halden stood near the well with his fiddle tucked beneath his chin. The first tune rolled gently across the gathering crowd. Steady, familiar, safe. Couples formed quickly. Children darted between skirts and boots. Laughter rose without restraint. Syrah moved to her usual place, the edge near the grain store where she could see without obstructing anyone. 2 girls she often worked beside glanced her way, then looked back at each other. One hesitated as if to step toward her, then thought better of it and joined the circle forming for the first dance. It wasn't cruelty. It was habit. The dance began, simple steps, synchronized turns. The rhythm was easy to follow. Syrah's foot shifted unconsciously again, heel tapping lightly against the packed earth. She stilled it immediately. Nearby, a group of older villagers spoke in low tones. "She keeps to herself," one said. "That's best," another replied. "She works hard. That doesn't change what she is." The words were not meant for her. She heard them anyway. Her jaw tightened slightly. Across the square, a young boy stumbled during a turn and laughed at himself. His mother clapped encouragement. Syrah felt something stir in her chest, not envy. Longing, not for applause, for ease. A new tune began, faster this time. The dancers spun in widening arcs, skirts flaring, boots striking earth in cheerful rhythm. She knew the pattern already. 3 steps forward. Turn. Clap. Back. The simplicity almost hurt. In her clan, dances did not begin with cheer. They began with grounding. A slow stamp that connected body to earth. A pause to honor what had been lost before celebrating what remained. She shifted her weight again. A subtle pivot of hip and shoulder, a memory of movement. Someone noticed. Mrs. Halden, carrying a tray of sweet cakes, paused near her. "You watching closely?" the baker said. "Yes, ma'am." "You want to learn?" The question hung unexpectedly between them. Syrah swallowed. "I know steps," she said carefully. Mrs. Halden studied her a moment, then glanced toward the circle of dancers. "It's different," she said finally. "You understand?" "Yes." The baker moved on. Syrah remained where she stood. The lanterns above flickered to life as twilight deepened. Warm light bathed the square in gold. The music swelled louder. The rhythm quickened. A sudden cheer rose when Tomas lifted his daughter and spun her in a wide circle. Syrah allowed herself one small smile. She would help clean afterward. She would carry benches back to storage. She would extinguish lanterns when others grew tired. That was her place. At the edge of the square, where shadows met light. The music played on, and though her heart moved in time with it, she did not step forward. The music carried long into the evening, spilling warmth across the square like liquid gold. Lanterns swayed gently overhead, casting soft halos against the darkening sky. The air was thick with laughter, cider, and the steady rhythm of boots striking earth. From the edge of the square, Syrah watched. She had grown used to the way people pretended not to notice her. It was easier for them that way. If they did not look directly at her, they did not have to confront the discomfort that followed. But pretending did not silence whispers. 2 men stood near the cider barrel. speaking low enough that they likely believed no one beyond arm's reach could hear them. "It's strange," one muttered, "seeing her here." "She's lived here 3 years," the other replied. "That doesn't make it less strange. She works harder than most." "That's not the point." Sira did not turn her head. She had learned long ago that reacting only fed curiosity. The point. She wondered what the point was. Across the square, the dancers formed another circle. This time, children were invited to join. Tomas' son pulled his sister toward the center, and even shy little Marin, who rarely left her mother's side, stepped forward with hesitant excitement. Sira's hands curled slightly at her sides. She had been told she could watch. No one had said she could not dance, but no one had said she could. The absence of invitation weighed heavier than refusal. A gust of wind swept through the square, lifting skirts and fluttering lantern flames. The fiddler adjusted his tempo, and the rhythm shifted into something livelier. Sira's foot tapped before she could stop it. A quick beat, then stillness. She folded her hands behind her back instead. Near the well, a group of older women sat on benches, knitting and observing the younger crowd. One of them, Mrs. Corin, whose son had fallen in the final year of the war, kept glancing in Sira's direction, not with anger, but with something unreadable. Sira held her gaze for a heartbeat before lowering her eyes. She did not blame them. She understood memory. In her own clan, songs were still sung about villages burned by human soldiers. The elders had spoken names with reverence and grief. Loss did not disappear because time passed. It only softened around the edges, or hardened. A sudden laugh rang out as one of the boys tripped during a spin and collided with another dancer. The circle broke into delighted chaos before reforming. Sira smiled faintly. She knew what her mother would have said. "Dance is not about perfection," she would whisper, tapping Sira's forehead gently. "It is about truth." Truth. Here, truth felt complicated. She shifted her weight again, this time allowing a subtle roll of her shoulders, a movement so small no one noticed. It helped release the tightness in her chest. A younger girl, Lisa, barely 7, wandered close to where Sira stood. "You're not dancing," Lisa said bluntly. Sira blinked. "No." "Why?" Sira hesitated. "They don't need me in circle." Lisa frowned. "That's silly." Sira almost laughed at the simplicity of it. Before she could respond, Lisa's mother called her back, gently steering her away. "Don't bother her," the woman murmured softly. "Bother?" Sira watched as Lisa rejoined the group. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even surprised. She simply felt separate. The music slowed again, shifting into a softer tune meant for pairs rather than circles. Lantern light glowed warmly against faces flushed from dancing. Sira stepped back further into shadow. She told herself it was enough to witness joy, to protect it by staying apart from it. But as the fiddler melody rose and fell, weaving through the square like a living thing, something inside her stirred stronger than before. Not resentment, not defiance. Something older, something inherited. The rhythm beneath the human melody was simple, steady, repetitive. She could feel where another beat could live inside it, where her people's grounding step might fit, where grief and celebration could share the same breath. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the music settle under her skin. When she opened them again, Mrs. Corin was still watching her. This time, their eyes held, and neither looked away. The whispers continued around the square, soft, cautious, lingering. But beneath them, something else began to build. A pause, a space, the kind of silence that waits for someone to step into it. The festival ended late. Lanterns burned low, cider barrels emptied, and one by one the villagers drifted home with tired smiles and sore feet. Sira stayed behind, as she always did, helping stack benches and gather dropped ribbons from the dust. The square looked smaller without music. Quieter. She liked it better that way. "Leave the lantern ropes," a familiar voice called gently. Sira turned. Old Master Halden stood near the well, fiddle tucked beneath his arm. His white hair glowed faintly under the last remaining lantern light. "Yes, sir," she replied. He studied her a moment. "You know the steps." It wasn't a question. Sira hesitated. "I watch." "You do more than watch." She lowered her gaze. "My feet move sometimes," she admitted softly. Halden's mouth twitched faintly. "I noticed." She stiffened slightly. "Sorry." "For what?" "For moving." The old man blinked. "You think movement needs apology?" She didn't answer. Halden leaned against the well's stone edge. When you shifted tonight, he said, you weren't following our rhythm. Syra's chest tightened. I didn't mean to interrupt. You didn't, he said calmly. You were adding something. She looked up slowly. In my clan, she said carefully, dance is different. I can imagine. We don't spin first, she explained quietly. We ground first. Halden's eyes sharpened with interest. Show me. The word startled her. Now. Yes. The square was empty. Only a few lanterns flickered against the dark. Syra hesitated. No crowd. No whispers. Just quiet. Slowly, she stepped into the center of the square. Halden raised his fiddle, but did not play. Without music, he said. Syra closed her eyes. Her bare foot pressed gently into the packed earth. One slow step, then another. Not fast, not sharp. A steady grounding rhythm. Heel, toe, breath. Her shoulders rolled slightly. Her hands remained open at her sides. She did not spin. She did not leap. She moved as though pressing memory into soil. Halden watched without speaking. After several breaths, she stopped. That's it, he asked softly. That's beginning, she replied. He nodded slowly. It's heavy. Yes. It feels like a story. Yes. Halden lifted the fiddle to his chin. Again. This time he played. Not the lively harvest tune, but something softer. Slower. He adjusted his rhythm to match her grounding step. The melody wove around her movements instead of forcing them. Syra's breath caught slightly. She shifted again, one measured turn, slower than the human dances she had watched. Her arms lifted slightly, not in flourish, but in balance. The music followed. When she paused, the fiddle paused. When she stepped, the melody stepped with her. For a moment, the square felt different. Not divided, just quiet. Halden lowered his bow. You carry something, he said softly. Memory, she answered. He nodded. Come tomorrow evening. She blinked. Why? I'd like to learn it properly. Her pulse quickened slightly. You want to learn mine? Yes. She hesitated. They might not like. Who? Them. Halden snorted lightly. I'm too old to ask permission for music. A faint, uncertain smile touched her face. Okay, she said quietly. The old fiddler studied her one last time. You stand at the edge too often, he said gently. It's safer. For who? She didn't answer. Halden turned and began walking toward his small house at the western fence. Syra, he called over his shoulder. Yes. Music doesn't belong to one blood. She watched him disappear into shadow. The square was empty now, silent. But something had shifted. For the first time since she had arrived in Briar Hollow, someone had not just tolerated her movement. They had listened. And tomorrow night, when the square was quiet again, she would step into its center not as shadow, but as teacher. The next evening, the square was empty again. Lantern ropes still hung from wooden beams, though unlit. The scent of cider lingered faintly in the dust. Most villagers were home, resting after the first night of celebration. Only the western edge of the square held sound, the soft tuning of a fiddle. Syra approached slowly. Old Master Halden stood near the well, about testing strings with short, thoughtful strokes. You came, he said without looking up. Yes. Good. He nodded toward the open space before him. Show me the beginning again. Syra stepped into the center. This time she did not hesitate as long. Her bare feet pressed into earth. Heel, toe, breath. The grounding rhythm returned, steady, deliberate, patient. Halden watched carefully, adjusting the pitch of his strings until he found something that fit beneath her movement. Why slow? He asked quietly as she stepped. Because we remember first, she replied. Remember what? Those not here. The old man's bow softened. She added a subtle turn, not spinning outward, but curving inward, hands drawing toward her chest before opening again. This is loss, she explained. Halden followed her timing, weaving a low melody around the movement. And this, he asked when she shifted into a slightly quicker rhythm. This is survival. Her feet struck more firmly now, not in anger, but in declaration. Halden's eyes flickered with understanding. You tell story with body. Yes. Without words. Yes. She paused. In war, she added softly, we danced after burning. The bow faltered briefly before steadying again. To grieve, he asked. To stay alive, she said. Silence lingered between notes. Halden adjusted his tune again, experimenting with blending a human harvest melody beneath her grounding steps. The effect was strange at first, the familiar cheer of festival music clashing against the weight of her rhythm. But slowly, something aligned. Her grounded step softened slightly. The melody shifted key. The two styles began to weave instead of collide. Syrah felt it before she understood it. The moment where her clan's story and Briar Hollow's celebration touched. She added a lift, a gentle rise onto the ball of her foot before settling back into earth. That's new, Halden observed. Yes. Why? Because here, we celebrate harvest. Halden smiled faintly. And in your clan? We celebrated surviving winter. The bow moved faster now, testing boundaries. Syrah turned more fully this time, allowing a subtle flare of movement in her arms. Not the sharp, fierce gestures of war dance, but something tempered, blended. This is not yours, she said quietly. It can be, Halden replied. She slowed to a stop. Why help me? She asked suddenly. The old man lowered his fiddle. Because I've watched you 3 years. She blinked. You think I don't see you standing at the edge? Her chest tightened. You listen to music like it belongs to you, he continued. You just don't step into it. They don't want. Some don't, he interrupted gently. Some don't know. He adjusted the fiddle under his chin again. Dance again. This time, she did not ground alone. He began with the harvest melody. Bright, light. Then she added her grounding beat beneath it. Heel, toe, breath. The two rhythms braided together slowly. It was imperfect, uneven, but alive. As they practiced, footsteps approached from the edge of the square. Syrah noticed first and faltered slightly. Halden did not stop playing. 2 children stood near the grain store, watching, not whispering, just curious. Syrah swallowed. Keep going, Halden murmured. She shifted her weight again. This time, she let the turn complete fully. Her skirt moved with the motion. The children edged closer. When she stopped, the square felt different than it had the night before. Not empty, not crowded. Open. You see, Halden said quietly. She looked at the children. They did not look afraid. They looked fascinated. This dance, Halden added softly, is not from another world. She met his eyes. It is from yours. Syrah looked down at the earth beneath her feet, then back toward the houses surrounding the square. Maybe both could live here. Maybe movement did not have to choose sides. As twilight deepened, she stepped once more into the center, not because she was invited, but because, for the first time, she felt the square make room. By the second night of the Harvest Festival, Briar Hollow glowed brighter than it had in years. Lanterns hung thicker across the square, their painted glass casting soft pools of amber and gold over packed earth. Garlands of dried wheat framed doorways. The air carried roasted chestnuts, spiced cider, and the warmth of shared celebration. Syrah stood behind the cooper's shed, listening. The music had already begun. Master Halden had started with the familiar tune, the one everyone knew. It was steady and safe, a melody that asked nothing unexpected of its dancers. She pressed her palms together to steady the tremor in her fingers. Tonight was not planned, not formally. Halden had said nothing about performance. But when he had practiced with her earlier that afternoon, his eyes had lingered longer than usual. Be ready, he had said simply. She had not asked for what. From the square came a burst of laughter as Tomas spun his daughter too quickly and nearly lost his footing. The rhythm quickened. Boots thudded in practiced sequence. Syrah stepped from shadow and moved toward her usual place at the edge. But something was different tonight. When she arrived near the grain store, she noticed the children from the previous evening already watching her, not the dancers. Watching her. Lisa waved again, more boldly this time. Syrah returned the gesture before she could stop herself. At the well, the dance shifted into a faster circle pattern. One of the younger women, Mira, stepped too hard on uneven ground and twisted awkwardly. A sharp cry cut through the music. The fiddler faltered mid-note. Mira stumbled out of the circle, clutching her ankle as others rushed to steady her. The music stopped completely. Silence pooled over the square, thick and uncertain. Mira laughed weakly, trying to brush it off, but she could not put weight on her foot. We'll sit you down, someone said. The circle dissolved awkwardly. Lanterns flickered in the sudden quiet. For a heartbeat, no one knew what to do. Master Halden did not lower his fiddle entirely. He looked across the square, towards Syrah. It was not a command, not an invitation spoken aloud, just a held note in the air. Her pulse hammered. She could remain at the edge. It would be easy. Safe. No one would fault her for silence. But the pause stretched. Uncomfortable. Empty. She stepped forward. The movement felt louder than it was. Several heads turned. Whispers began instantly. What's she doing? Wait. Is she? Sira did not look at them. She walked into the center of the square. Lantern light touched her face fully now. Her heart beat so hard she thought it might drown the moment. Master Halden lifted his bow, but he did not begin with the harvest tune. He waited. Sira closed her eyes. Heel, toe, breath. The grounding step returned, slow and steady against the earth. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. That's not our dance. No, it's hers. She let the grounding continue for 3 full beats. Then she added a turn. Not sharp, not defiant. Controlled, measured. Halden followed her rhythm with a low, unfamiliar melody. The sound was different from the cheerful festival tunes. It carried weight. Some villagers stiffened. Mrs. Corrin, seated near the well, leaned forward slightly. Sira's arms lifted, not high, not aggressive, but open. Her steps told the beginning of her story. Loss, fire, separation. Her movements were slower than human dances, but precise. Each shift of weight intentional. Each turn deliberate. The square remained silent. No laughter, no clapping. Only the sound of bow against string and her bare feet striking earth. She felt the stairs, but she did not falter. After several beats, she softened the rhythm. The grounding step blended into something lighter. She introduced a rise onto her toes, a subtle lift that matched the familiar human melody Halden wove gently into his own. Now the music changed. The harvest tune emerged slowly beneath her rhythm, not replacing it, layering with it. The crowd leaned in without realizing. Her movements followed. The sharp grief steps softened into something warmer. A circle formed around her again, not dancers yet, but witnesses. Her final turn ended facing the lantern archway. She stilled. Silence pressed in fully. Even the wind seemed to pause. For a long breath, no one moved. Not rejection, not acceptance, just silence. And in that silence, something began to shift. The silence did not break immediately. It stretched, long enough for doubt to creep in. Sira stood in the center of the square, chest rising and falling slowly, lantern light trembling across her green skin. Her final turn had ended in stillness, palms open at her sides, breath steady. No one clapped. No one spoke. For one fragile moment, she wondered if she had misunderstood everything. The whispers began first, low, cautious, uncertain. That wasn't our dance. It wasn't wrong. It felt heavy. Mrs. Corrin rose slowly from her bench near the well. Her movements were careful, her face unreadable. She stepped closer to the circle forming around Sira. Sira resisted the urge to step back. At the edge of the crowd, children watched wide-eyed. Lisa clutched her mother's hand, but did not look afraid. Master Halden kept his fiddle tucked beneath his chin, while hovering just above the strings, as though the music might resume if someone gave it permission. Sira's pulse hammered in her ears. She had not meant to challenge them. She had not meant to interrupt their celebration. She had only meant to fill the silence. Mrs. Corrin stopped a few paces away. "What was that?" she asked quietly. The question was not sharp, but it carried weight. Sira swallowed. "In my clan," she began carefully, "we dance to remember." "Remember what?" someone asked from behind. "Those we lose." A murmur moved through the crowd. The war still lived in Briar Hollow's memory. Sons, brothers, friends. Mrs. Corrin's jaw tightened faintly. "And tonight," she pressed. "Tonight," Sira said softly, "I dance for both." The words settled over the square like ash. Halden lowered his bow slightly, allowing the silence to hold. "For both," Tomas echoed. "For yours," Sira said, glancing briefly toward Mrs. Corrin, "and mine." No one interrupted her. "In war," she continued, voice steady despite the tremor in her chest, "we dance after fire. To remind we still breathe." Her foot pressed into the earth again. Heel, toe, breath. Not as performance, but as explanation. Mrs. Corrin's gaze flickered downward to that grounding step. "My son danced," the older woman said suddenly. The square shifted. Sira looked up. "He used to dance here," Mrs. Corrin continued. "Right where you're standing." A ripple of memory passed through the crowd. "He would stomp too hard," Tomas added quietly. "Never kept rhythm." A faint, fragile smile passed across a few faces. Syrah's chest tightened into possibility. Some villagers remained stiff at the edge, unsure. But others leaned forward, curious, listening. Syrah felt the shift before she saw it. The space she had filled alone was no longer empty. It was shared. She turned once more, slower this time, allowing the harvest tune to rise stronger within Halden's melody. The grounding remained beneath it, steady, alive, and for the first time since she had stepped into the center, she was not dancing alone. The silence that had threatened to swallow her had instead opened something new. Not acceptance yet, not fully, but a bridge had formed, and no one stepped away. The circle widened without anyone announcing it. Lantern light flickered across faces no longer guarded, but uncertain in a different way, as if the ground beneath the square had shifted slightly and no one was sure where to place their feet next. Syrah felt it too. The difference. The space was no longer hers alone. Mrs. Corrin's heel struck the earth again, firmer this time. Heel, toe, breath. Syrah matched her rhythm, slowing her movements so the older woman would not fall behind. Master Halden adjusted the melody carefully, weaving the harvest tune more clearly into the grounding beat. The familiar notes of Briar Hollow's celebration rose above the deeper rhythm beneath it. Children stepped forward first. They always did. Tomas' daughter mimicked Syrah's turn, nearly losing her balance before catching herself and laughing. Lisa tried the grounding step with exaggerated seriousness, stamping too hard and looking delighted by the sound. The villagers watched. The older ones measured. The younger ones felt. Syrah allowed the movement to evolve. Her next turn was not inward with grief, but outward, arms sweeping slightly wider, shoulders opening toward the circle rather than guarding her center. The harvest melody brightened. The grounding remained. It was no longer war dance. It was no longer only human festival dance. It was something in between. A murmur ran through the crowd when she added a sharper step, not aggressive, but strong, a reminder of where the rhythm had begun. Some flinched instinctively at the intensity. Syrah noticed. She softened it. She did not erase it, but she shaped it. Mrs. Corrin's eyes filled slowly with tears she did not brush away. "My boy used to stomp like that," she murmured quietly to no one in particular. The words carried. The circle tightened. Tomas stepped forward next, awkwardly at first. His boots struck the earth in uneven rhythm beside Syrah's bare feet. Heel, toe, breath. The difference between them was visible. Green skin and weathered human hands. Small tusks and graying beard. But the rhythm beneath them was shared. Master Halden increased the tempo slightly, not to rush, but to invite. The harvest tune rose stronger now, hopeful and bright. The grounding beat beneath it steadied the music rather than darkened it. Syrah felt warmth in her chest she had not known she was waiting for. She spun, slower than the village dancers usually did, but full this time, her skirt lifting slightly with the motion. When she landed, she did not retreat to shadow. She faced them, fully. Her final sequence came without thought. 3 grounding steps. A lift, a turn, then a pause with her hands open, not in surrender. In offering. The music softened. Lantern flames wavered gently in the quiet air. This time, the silence that followed was not tense. It was reverent. No one whispered. No one looked away. They were not seeing an orc child in the center of their square. They were seeing a story told in movement, grief and harvest, fire and rebuilding, loss and survival woven together without accusation. Syrah's breath slowed. Her heart steadied. For the first time since she had arrived in Briar Hollow, she did not feel like an interruption. She felt like part of the rhythm. Master Halden let the final note linger before lowering his bow. The silence held for a long breath. Then, one clap. Soft. Mrs. Corrin. Another followed. Tomas. Then a third. Then more. The sound built gradually, not explosive, but sincere. Syrah blinked rapidly, unsure how to stand under it. Children rushed forward first, pulling at her hands. "Show me again. Do the stomp. Spin like that." Laughter returned to the square, not mocking, not uneasy. "Open." Syrah looked around at the circle forming once more, this time not from hesitation, but invitation. The edge of the square no longer called to her. When the music began again, she did not step back. She stepped forward, and the village followed. The music did not return to what it had been before. It changed. The harvest tune still carried through the square, bright and familiar, but now it held something deeper beneath it, a grounding rhythm that pulsed steady as breath. Some villagers followed the new steps easily. Others stumbled and laughed, adjusting awkwardly. But no one left the circle. Sira moved among them, no longer alone at its center, but guiding gently from within it. Slow first, she told Tomas' daughter, placing her own heel carefully into the dust. Feel ground. The girl nodded seriously and copied her. Mrs. Corrin stood only a few paces away, moving carefully, each step deliberate. Her eyes were wet, but she did not hide it. As the dance continued, the square filled with a different kind of energy. It was not the carefree joy of earlier in the evening. It was layered, memory beneath celebration, grief beneath laughter. The shift did not go unnoticed. At the edge of the square, two men who had whispered earlier stood silent now. "That's not what I expected," one admitted quietly. "No," the other said. "It isn't." Near the cider barrel, a woman who had lost her brother in the war wiped her cheek with the back of her hand as Sira's grounding step echoed through the lantern light. The rhythm was simple, but it carried weight. Sira did not exaggerate her movements. She did not perform for applause. She moved with intention, and when she turned, her eyes met those in the circle without flinching. She saw what she had not seen before. Recognition, not of sameness, of shared loss. Master Halden shifted the melody again, blending the old harvest tune into a softer harmony beneath the steady beat of heels against earth. The music felt fuller now, as if it had been missing something before. A young man near the back of the crowd, barely older than Sira, stepped forward hesitantly. He had returned from the border only last year. His arm still bore a scar from a blade that had nearly taken it. He stomped once. Hard. Too hard. The sound cracked sharply through the square. He stiffened, embarrassed. Sira stepped toward him. "Again," she said gently. He blinked. She matched his heavy step with her own, not challenging it, not shrinking from it. Heel. Toe. Breath. His shoulders loosened slightly. He tried again. Less forceful. More measured. Mrs. Corrin watched him carefully. "That's it," she whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was speaking to. The circle tightened further. Hands brushed hands. Boots and bare feet shared the same dust. The lantern light warmed faces once tight with caution. Sira felt the rhythm expand, not just in movement, but in breath. The square inhaled and exhaled together. A final sequence formed without plan. 3 grounding steps. A shared turn. Then stillness. This time, when the music stopped, no one rushed to fill the quiet. They stood together in it. Not tense. Not uncertain. Simply present. Mrs. Corrin stepped forward again. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached towards Sira. For a heartbeat, Sira thought she might withdraw, but the older woman did not. She placed her hand gently over Sira's. "My son," she said softly, "would have liked that dance." The words struck deeper than applause. Sira swallowed hard. "I'm glad," she whispered. Tomas cleared his throat loudly, wiping at his own eyes in a way he hoped no one noticed. Children tugged at Sira's sleeves, asking for the steps again. And as the music began once more, softer this time, slower, the crowd did not divide. It did not retreat into old patterns. It remained woven together. Tears had fallen in the square that night, but they had not fallen alone. They had fallen in rhythm, and no one stepped away from it. The lanterns burned lower as the night deepened, but no one hurried to extinguish them. The square of Briar Hollow, once divided by habit and unspoken distance, felt changed in a way no one could fully name. The harvest tables stood half cleared, the cider nearly gone. The music softened into something gentle and reflective. Sira stood where she had finished the last dance. Not in shadow, not at the edge, in the center. Children still circled her, trying the grounding step with exaggerated seriousness. Tomas' daughter insisted on demonstrating her version, stomping too hard and laughing when dust puffed around her boots. "Slow," Sira reminded gently, smiling despite herself. "Feel earth." The girl tried again. Better. Mrs. Corrin remained nearby, seated now, watching with a gaze no longer guarded. When Sira's eyes met hers, the older woman gave the faintest nod. Not grand, not theatrical, but intentional. Master Halden lifted his fiddle once more. This time, he called softly, "Everyone." There was hesitation. Then Tomas stepped forward again. Then his wife. Then the young soldier with the scarred arm. Even the two men who had whispered earlier moved closer, uncertain but unwilling to remain apart. The circle formed naturally. No one directed it. No one claimed ownership. Halden began with the harvest melody, bright, familiar, then, without announcement, shifted into the deeper rhythm Syrah had brought with her. Heel, toe, breath. At first, the sound was uneven. Boots landed out of time. A few missteps drew quiet laughter. But slowly, gradually, the rhythm aligned. Syrah did not lead from the front. She moved within the circle, adjusting, matching, guiding without command. Her grounding step no longer stood alone. It echoed. The sound of human boots and bare orc feet striking earth together carried differently. Not as clash, but as chorus. The square felt warmer. Not because of lantern light. Because of proximity. As the final sequence approached, Halden slowed the tempo deliberately. 3 grounding steps. A shared turn. Then stillness. When the music ended this time, the silence that followed was not fragile. It was full. Mrs. Corrin rose slowly and crossed the small distance between herself and Syrah. Without hesitation, she embraced her. The square inhaled sharply. Syrah stiffened at first and used to such closeness. Then, carefully, she returned it. It was brief, but it was real. Tomas clapped first. Not tentative. Firm. Others followed immediately. The applause built naturally. Not explosive, not overwhelming, but steady and sincere. Syrah's eyes blurred slightly. She did not wipe them. The circle loosened into smaller conversations, softer laughter. Children tugged at her hands, asking if she would teach them the grounding step again tomorrow. Tomorrow, she repeated. Yes, Lisa insisted. Before sunset, Syrah looked around the square. No one avoided her gaze. No one turned away. Even the men who had once whispered nodded politely as they passed. It was not perfect. It was not complete. But it was different. Later, as lanterns were finally lowered and benches stacked, Syrah did not retreat immediately to the cooper's shed. She remained near the well, watching the last of the villagers drift home. The square felt smaller somehow. Or perhaps she felt larger within it. Master Halden approached quietly. You see, he asked. She nodded. I didn't step to edge, she said softly. No, he agreed. You didn't. She looked down at the earth beneath her feet, the same packed ground she had once pressed into alone. Now it held many imprints. Heel, toe, breath. She inhaled deeply. For the first time since arriving in Briar Hollow, she did not feel like a guest. She did not feel like a tolerated presence. She felt rooted. When she finally walked toward her small shed behind the cooper's house, it no longer felt like a place she hid. It felt like home. And in the quiet square behind her, where lantern smoke curled into the night sky, no shadow marked the edge where she once stood. Because she no longer stood there at all.